Firefighter Jake Thompson and Officer Maria Delgado never imagined that a Friday night at Cedarville's busiest bar would turn into a violent showdown that would shake the entire town. One moment, they were public servants fulfilling their roles. The next, they were locked in a confrontation no one could have predicted. It was a Friday evening in Cedarville, a town where everyone knew each other's names and the rhythm of life moved slowly, like the swing of an old clock. The streets were lined with familiar storefronts, and the hum of conversation spilled out from restaurants and cafes. At the center of town, the local bar glowed under neon lights, its windows fogged slightly from the warmth and laughter inside. The place was known as a gathering spot for both friends and strangers, a space where stories were shared and the pressures of the week melted away. On this particular night, it was crowded but not unusually so, a mix of young professionals, regular patrons, and a few travelers passing through. Among the patrons was a man whose presence commanded attention without demanding it. A firefighter for more than a decade, he was widely respected in the community. People often spoke of his bravery and dedication, recounting stories of him rushing into burning buildings or helping neighbors during emergencies. On the surface, he seemed calm and collected, a figure of reassurance in a world that often felt unpredictable. But beneath that exterior, there were currents no one could see, emotions simmering quietly, the kind that could be easily overlooked until they suddenly burst forth. The bar itself had a familiar rhythm. Glasses clinked in polite toasts, laughter rose and fell like waves, and the bartender moved with practiced precision, sliding drinks across the counter and wiping down surfaces that gleamed under the soft lighting. The jukebox played a mix of classic rock and contemporary hits, the tunes blending into the hum of conversation. It was an ordinary Friday night, the kind that made Cedarville feel safe and predictable. People leaned on that sense of routine, trusting that what happened behind the bar's doors would stay there, a temporary escape from reality, not a place where life's rules were suddenly rewritten. But the first signs of tension were subtle, almost imperceptible. A few patrons exchanged curt words, their gestures slightly sharper than necessary. A hand slammed down on a table, more forcefully than usual. Someone's gaze lingered a moment too long, a frown briefly shadowing a familiar face. The bartender noticed, his eyes flicking nervously between the tables, but he dismissed it as normal human irritation, a minor disturbance in the otherwise calm environment. By late evening, the bar had filled to capacity. Conversations overlapped, laughter mixed with the occasional sigh of frustration, and the hum of energy was palpable. It was then that the first officer arrived, stepping through the doorway with a measured, cautious demeanor. Their presence was intended to calm, to observe a minor complaint about noise and possible altercations, nothing more. Patrons didn't initially notice, their attention caught up in their own conversations, their own small dramas. But the tension that had been quietly building began to thicken, a tangible weight pressing against the walls. In the corner of the bar, the firefighter was finishing a drink, scanning the room with a quiet intensity. The minor disturbances around him seemed to magnify, though no one else could see it. Each passing moment carried the potential for escalation, like a spark hovering over dry kindling. And as the officers moved further inside, walking toward the source of the noise, something unspoken shifted. Eyes met, energy collided, and an ordinary evening, full of familiar faces and comforting routines, teetered on the edge of chaos. What no one could predict in that moment was that a single decision, a single outburst, would transform the night forever, leaving the bar, the town, and everyone inside changed in ways they would never forget. The atmosphere inside the bar shifted almost instantly. What had been a normal, lively evening became charged with tension, an invisible current that seemed to vibrate through the air. Patrons paused mid-conversation, their attention drawn to the center of the room where the firefighter stood, his posture rigid, eyes focused on the officers who had entered. He was a familiar figure of authority and trust, but that evening, something in his demeanor was different, unsettling. The casual confidence he usually exuded had been replaced with a sharp, almost volatile intensity, a storm quietly brewing beneath the surface. The officers approached slowly, trying to maintain control without escalating the situation. Their voices were calm but firm, a measured attempt to address a minor disturbance that had grown in the crowded bar. The firefighter responded immediately, moving toward them with a force that caught everyone by surprise. Patrons froze, some stepping back instinctively, while others reached for their phones, capturing the unexpected confrontation. The room felt smaller somehow, the noise of the bar muted under the sudden tension, as if time itself had slowed. Then the first violent contact occurred. A struggle erupted in the middle of the floor. Chairs tipped over with loud crashs, glass shattered, and the familiar hum of conversation turned into startled gasps and murmurs of fear. The firefighter's strength and training were evident as he grappled with the officers, who were equally determined to maintain authority. It was a chaotic clash of movement and energy, unpredictable and alarming. People ducked under tables or pressed themselves against walls, trying to remain out of harm's way. The music stopped abruptly, the bartender frozen behind the counter, unsure whether to intervene or call for help. Witnesses later described the scene as surreal. The man they had trusted to protect the community was now in the midst of a violent confrontation with law enforcement. It seemed impossible to reconcile the heroism of his everyday life with the aggression unfolding before their eyes. The officers sustained injuries, though thankfully nothing life-threatening, yet the physical struggle was enough to leave the room shaken. Blood and broken glass marked the center of the floor, a stark contrast to the carefree atmosphere that had existed only moments before. Security staff tried to step in, their attempts hampered by the intensity of the altercation. Even experienced bouncers were forced to step back at times, wary of engaging directly with someone trained in emergency response and capable of significant physical force. The firefighters' movements were precise, almost automatic, a reminder of years spent responding to crises, yet they were now being used in a setting completely opposite to their intended purpose. Patrons whispered among themselves, sharing disbelief and fear, realizing that the man who had once been a symbol of safety was now a source of danger. The incident didn't last long, yet every second felt elongated, as if the chaos had stretched time itself. Eventually, the struggle ended with officers regaining some measure of control, though the aftermath left a lasting impression. People emerged from their hiding places, shaken, trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. The bar was in disarray, tables overturned, glasses shattered, and a silence had settled over the crowd, heavy and uncomfortable. Even as the adrenaline faded, the tension remained, a lingering reminder that a single moment could erase the normalcy of an entire evening. That night, everyone inside the bar understood that the line between hero and aggressor was thinner than they had ever imagined, and that trust, once broken, was difficult to restore. The morning after the incident, Cedarville woke to a town buzzing with whispers and speculation. Word of the altercation at the local bar had spread quickly, carried on social media, in coffee shops, and along the quiet streets where neighbors often exchanged news. Videos of the incident surfaced online, shaky recordings from patrons' phones capturing flashes of chaos, tables overturned, officers grappling with a figure in a firefighter's uniform, and the stunned faces of witnesses frozen in fear. The footage was unsettling, almost surreal, showing someone the community had trusted as a hero acting in ways that seemed incomprehensible. Law enforcement immediately launched an official investigation, recognizing that the incident was far more serious than a simple bar fight. Detectives arrived at the scene, documenting every detail, photographing the damage, and collecting statements from witnesses, while the bar's owner attempted to manage both the chaos and the influx of curious onlookers. Investigators noted the difficulty of reconstructing events from conflicting accounts. Patrons described the sequence differently, each memory colored by fear, shock, or the angle from which they had watched. It was a puzzle that required patience and precision, and even the officers involved struggled to recall the rapid sequence of movements and actions that had taken place. Surveillance footage from the bar's security cameras became crucial evidence. The recordings showed the confrontation from multiple angles, revealing not only the physical struggle but subtle details that eyewitnesses had missed. Gestures, pauses, and exchanges of energy became important clues for detectives trying to understand what had triggered the escalation. The footage painted a picture of a sudden, intense confrontation, but it also hinted at a build-up moments of tension, a glance here, a gesture there that had gone unnoticed in the crowded, noisy bar. Investigators began to see that the event was not entirely spontaneous, though the full context was still unclear. Meanwhile, the public's reaction was deeply divided. Some residents defended the firefighter, citing years of selfless service and heroism. They saw a momentary lapse fueled by stress or alcohol rather than a deliberate act of aggression. Others demanded accountability, emphasizing that no past heroism could excuse violence against law enforcement. Rumors and speculations circulated freely, some suggesting hidden tensions between the bar staff and police, others hinting at personal struggles the firefighter might have been experiencing. The community felt caught between disbelief and concern, struggling to reconcile the man they knew with the figure captured in videos and photographs. Detectives delved into the firefighter's background, uncovering details that added layers to the story. His career record was impeccable, filled with commendations and community recognition, yet personal records indicated recent challenges, financial difficulties, signs of stress, and moments of tension with family members. While none of these factors excused the assault, they provided context, clues to a complex human story behind the public image. Investigators realized the incident was not just a criminal matter but also a reflection of pressures, both visible and hidden, that could culminate in explosive ways. Every interview, every observation, and every piece of evidence became part of a larger narrative, a story not only about what had happened that night, but also why it had happened and how a trusted member of the community could suddenly become a source of fear. As the investigation deepened, a series of unexpected discoveries began to reshape the narrative. What had initially appeared to be a straightforward case of aggression now revealed complexities that few in Cedarville had anticipated. Evidence suggested that the altercation inside the bar had not been entirely unprovoked. Detectives uncovered prior interactions between the officers and several patrons earlier in the evening, minor disputes that, while seemingly inconsequential at the time, had created an undercurrent of tension. What had seemed like routine law enforcement presence now appeared to be a trigger in a more complicated chain of events. Witness accounts began to offer new insights as well. People came forward with details that had been overlooked in the immediate aftermath. Some mentioned heated exchanges between the officers and other individuals earlier in the night. Others described the firefighter's behavior leading up to the confrontation, his occasional glances at certain patrons, a noticeable shift in posture, subtle signs of agitation that might have gone unnoticed by casual observers. When pieced together, these fragments suggested that the night had been building toward a breaking point, a collision of personalities and pressures rather than a sudden, unexplainable outburst. Further investigation revealed aspects of the firefighter's personal life that provided additional context. Detectives discovered that he had been under immense stress for months. Financial strain, compounded by mounting family responsibilities, had created a pressure that few could see but many could feel in subtle ways. Colleagues described him as unusually quiet in the weeks leading up to the incident, withdrawn in ways that contrasted sharply with the confident, outgoing demeanor he usually displayed on the job. This combination of external stressors and the immediate provocation at the bar painted a picture of a man pushed to his limits, one whose professional composure faltered under conditions that would challenge anyone. The twist in the investigation came when forensic analysis revealed that the officers' approach may have inadvertently escalated the situation. Their standard procedure, meant to assert control and maintain order, clashed with the heightened emotions in the room. The detective team concluded that neither side had anticipated the intensity of the other's response. It was a convergence of professional duty, personal pressure, and environmental chaos, a scenario where intention and outcome diverged dramatically. This revelation reframed the public's understanding of the incident. The narrative shifted from a story of an unprovoked assault to a more nuanced account of human behavior under stress. Community members began to see the incident not simply as a moral failing, but as an event shaped by circumstance, timing, and the fragility of human composure. The firefighter remained accountable for his actions, but the investigation highlighted the broader forces at play, the invisible weight of personal struggles, the unpredictability of crowded, tense environments, and the ways in which even well-trained professionals can be overwhelmed. Cedarville faced the unsettling realization that heroism and vulnerability often coexist, and that understanding the full story required looking beyond what was visible in the chaos of a single night. The aftermath of the incident left Cedarville grappling with a mix of relief, confusion, and lingering unease. In the weeks that followed, the legal process unfolded with careful attention to both accountability and context. The firefighter faced criminal charges for assault, a necessary step to uphold the law, but the court also considered the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the event. Plea negotiations included provisions for mandatory counseling and anger management programs, recognizing that addressing the root causes of his behavior was as important as punishing the act itself. The decision reflected a balance between justice and rehabilitation, acknowledging that one night of chaos did not erase years of service or define a person entirely. The officers involved returned to duty after a period of recovery, physically unharmed but emotionally affected by the confrontation. The trauma of facing violence in a familiar environment lingered, and some admitted privately that their perception of routine safety had shifted. They, too, participated in support programs, both to process the incident and to rebuild confidence in their professional roles. The bar, heavily scrutinized during the investigation, reopened with new security measures and protocols designed to prevent similar escalations. Staff and regular patrons carried the memory of that night, a reminder of how quickly an ordinary evening could spiral into chaos. Community response was varied and passionate. Town meetings drew large crowds, with residents debating issues of trust, responsibility, and accountability. People spoke openly about the complexities of heroism and the human capacity for error. Some emphasized the need for stronger support systems for first responders, highlighting the invisible pressures that accumulate in high-stakes professions. Others focused on personal responsibility, arguing that no background or stress could justify physical violence. The dialogue revealed a community struggling to reconcile conflicting emotions, admiration for bravery, disappointment in misjudgment, and fear of unpredictability. In parallel, the firefighter took steps to repair his reputation and relationships within the town. He participated in public forums discussing stress management, mental health, and the importance of seeking help before problems escalate. His efforts were cautious and deliberate, acknowledging the seriousness of his actions while emphasizing lessons learned. Slowly, some trust was restored, though it was clear that certain scars would remain, both for him and for those who had witnessed the event firsthand. The story became a case study in the delicate balance between personal struggle and public responsibility, illustrating how one person's actions can ripple through a community. As time passed, Cedarville began to return to its routines, but the incident remained a touchstone for reflection. Residents spoke of it in hushed tones and occasionally in public discussions, always with the sense that normalcy had been tested and stretched. The bar reopened fully, officers resumed their patrols, and the firefighter returned to work after completing his required programs. Yet the memory of the night lingered like a shadow, a reminder that even in a familiar place, with familiar faces, unpredictability could erupt, and human behavior could defy expectations. Cedarville learned that trust and accountability are fragile, that heroes are human, and that understanding often requires looking beyond what is visible to the deeper, unseen pressures that shape actions and decisions.